Hello, and welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a program presented by the ARI Podcasting Network and hosted by George Koperna. What is STEAM? STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. During each episode, we will take a few minutes to sit down with professionals in different STEAM-related fields to give them an opportunity to share their story and give their perspectives with the goal of promoting career awareness to potentially interested students, young professionals, and of course, anyone else who shares a fascination with these areas of study. And now, please join us as we tap into the STEAM of Consciousness.
Welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a podcast on the ARI Podcasting Network. Joining us today is Lexi Shultz, who is Vice President of Science Policy and Government Relations. My name is Denise Hills. I am your guest host this week, and welcome, Lexi.
Thanks so much for having me, Denise. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too, and I'm really glad that you were able to have the time. Now, you work for the American Geophysical Union, which is a professional society for geoscientists. It is not just American-based, but it is a very large organization. So tell me, what is your day-to-day like as a Vice President of Science Policy and Government Relations for AGU?
It's such a good question. So, as you know, the American Geophysical Union is the home for individual scientists. So our members work in academia, they work for government, they work for industry. And I like to say they study everything from the center of the earth to outer space. And we're not just American, we're not just geophysical, and we're not a union. But in my role, what I do is I advocate for policies that support our members and the work that they do and the scientific enterprise overall. And that's sort of half of the work. And then the other half of the work is really working with our community to give them the skills, the confidence, and the opportunity to use their voices in support of science being used in policy and making a difference in the world.
Well, Lexi, that is so admirable. It's like I respect what you do, and full disclosure, Lexi and I have worked together in some programs at at AGU, the American Geophysical Union, and her expertise has actually led to some of the skills that I use in my day to day. And so, Lexi, one of the things that we like to talk about on this podcast is, how did you get into this role? Like, what was your pathway to? I would never, when I was a wee lass, I would never have thought about doing science policy, or I would have even not known what government relations is. So how did you get to where you are today?
It's such a good question. And I do like to say that my career makes more sense in hindsight than it did looking forward. Mm-hmm. But I will say I was one of those kids that loved science from a very early age. Someone gave me a kid's book on black holes, and I decided right then and there I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I just loved the idea of science, about being curious about the world and the universe and trying to find ways to understand what it was all about. And so I did study science. I had one of those moments where I was kind of told girls don't do physics. And so I ended up going into chemistry. And in college, I did an environmental chemistry thesis with an ecological institute that was nearby. It was a great experience. I was studying streams. I ended up working for that institute after college, but I really wanted to know, here were scientists that were studying acid rain or the Amazon rainforest, all these things that I thought were so important, but how did their work translate to making change, in the world? I was young, right? I wanted to make a difference in the world. And at that time I was told, well, scientists don't do that. So I still loved science. I still love science, but I ended up going to law school and I became an environmental attorney because that's what I thought I needed to do in order for science to make a difference in the world. And I went to work for, I went through law school and I did the clerkship thing, but then I ended up working for environmental organizations in DC as a policy person and ultimately found my way back to the American Geophysical Union. And what I like to say is I make sure that scientists know now that it is part of their role to make, to have their science make a difference in the world. So
Mhm.
that's why I say it kind of makes more sense as a backstory, but it is true that that's what I was driving at, and I'm very lucky because I think of myself as a science person at heart. That's how I came into all of this, even though I don't have a PhD and, I might not be considered a scientist by some in the community, but I get to learn every day. I get to work with amazing scientists who are studying such fascinating things and who are such amazing people like you, Denise. So I feel very lucky about that.
Yeah, Lexi, I think that 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 story of your journey to where you are now, that science has many faces. Science is not a monolith, and just because you're not doing lab science doesn't mean that you are any less of a scientist. And we also, different people have different skill sets, and for you to be able to identify, hey, where my skills are is, you know making sure other people know the value of science. I think that that's really something special. And
Thank you.
Yeah. And you mentioned, it's like you got your spark as a kid with loving science, with a book. you know I hate that you didn't necessarily get support, that, oh, girls don't do physics. uh that's such a it hurts my heart. uh but you didn't let that kill your spark. um so how did you decide that law school was the way to go? It's like you had an science degree, you were working in environmental science. What drove you for law school in particular?
I did the thing that a lot of people find scary, but I actually said, who can I talk to that might know how do I take science and do something with that? And so I actually did some informational interviews. Now I wouldn't find it scary at all. And I like to talk about the fact that most people love talking about what they do. They love to help younger people. And so I encourage people all the time to do them. But at the time, here I was, a young person, an incredible introvert. I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying.
Mm.
But I talked to people who were either working in policy or had gone to law school. And I found them through people that were working at the institute that I worked at, through a professor. I just asked around, like, who should I talk to? And the recommendation was that I go to law school. And I have to say, I kind of did a lot to try not to go to law school because I wasn't sold on the idea of law as that pathway in. I said I'm going to try and see how it goes, but I did all these things. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I didn't actually really study for the LSATs because I thought, well, if I don't do well, I won't go. I only applied to 3 schools and I said, if I don't go in, I won't go. I really tried hard. In the end, I deferred, I called to defer, in order to make some more money. And I was offered a large scholarship in one of the law schools. And I could not refuse that because I knew I wanted to do nonprofit work. I knew I wasn't, so that was really a blessing for me.
Mhm.
And while I was in law school, it's easy to kind of get swayed by, oh, you have to do the thing that other lawyers do. But I was able ultimately to say, I didn't go to law school to necessarily be a litigator or work for a law firm. Like this is my passion. This is what I want to do. I want to do something with environmental organizations or science groups. And I kept going until I got there.
Yeah, that's to me, I think that is a really big. There are a couple of big takeaways there. It's like talk to people, ask them questions, get them to talk to you. That's one of the goals of this podcast is really to talk with people and have them talk about what they do, because people do like to do that. And also, hopefully people like to do it because they enjoy what they do. And also to that you don't necessarily have to follow the same path as everybody else. That just because everybody in your master's or PhD program is going to go stay in academia doesn't mean that you have to. Just because you're going to law school doesn't mean that you have to be a practicing lawyer. That those skills are applicable elsewhere. And I think that to me is a big lesson that I get from your journey, is that even though you didn't really want to go to law school, you saw the value of participating in that program to get you to the pathway, to get you to where you are today. So tell me a little bit more about some of the things that you get to do. It's like we talked a little bit about your day to day, but you mentioned one aspect of your work is you get to help scientists like me learn their voice and use their voice. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So we've started some programs that work intensively with scientists who are interested in becoming more involved in policy and communications. One of them, as you know, is a program called Voices for Science. This is a program, people have to apply for it, and they have to sort of demonstrate that they have a reason why they want to come. We are looking for people who are serious about science making a difference in the world. But once they're in, it's a year-long program where we provide all kinds of skills building workshops, an intensive in-person workshop, and then programs throughout the year, monthly phone calls. And we ask the participants to create a goal of making some difference in the world by the end of the year and to commit to taking monthly action along the way. So it's a commitment, but we provide so much support and also community. One of the things that people who've come through this program have said is that it's the community of other scientists who are in the room, as well as engaging with AGU, with my organization, that is so meaningful. And it really does. It has enabled them to achieve real things in the world, but also to really have much more confidence in their own abilities and in their own communication styles. And we've done this now for 8 years. People have done amazing things. So one woman that I've always been so impressed with, Lauren Haygood in Oklahoma. She created a citizen science water quality project. And through that project, she not only educated people in her community about the importance of water quality and how you can go about testing them, and she also engaged local policymakers to look at some of these issues. She did media. She got lots of attention on social media, and so she really got, the kind of story out into the world. And all of this came about because she said, all right, I have a goal and I'm going to draw on the support and on the, resources, and I'm going to take action. So that's the kind of stuff that people can do.
Yeah, no, that is so exciting. I love to hear about that. So, as I know, and so your other half of the job is not necessarily directly working with the scientists or the community members of the American Geophysical Union, but it's a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about that other
Yeah,
side.
about the direct policy work.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough to lead a team of 6, and they're great. And some of my team are dedicated to working directly with congressional offices, members of Congress, and the U.S. administration. We are a global organization, but we have so many countries that we're active in that it's very hard to be as active everywhere. But we have a lot of expertise about the U.S. federal system, and we actually go up to congressional offices, we have meetings. Sometimes they're just us, sometimes they're with other science societies or other organizations that are of like mind. We bring scientists up to the Hill to meet with their elected officials. You know, everyone lives in a place with an elected official if you live in the United States. And we talk about issues that are so important to science. You know, much research depends on federal funding. So talking to members of Congress about how critical that is and what that funding enables scientists to do for the country, for our economy, our health, our well-being, that's a lot of that work. We will write letters that get sent up. We look at pieces of legislation and analyze them and either endorse them or provide comments back to congressional offices. You know, we do a million different things. I think the policy work does draw a little bit on my legal background, understanding how to read a statute, you know, what it means, you know, how to parse through all the particular language. But a lot of it also draws on our members' expertise. We get asked by members of Congress all the time about, what do you think of this bill? What do you think of that bill? And part of the reason they're asking that is because they know that our communities studies like water or oceans or, you know, space or whatever the bill is about. And so we are able to tap into that to then translate that for policymakers. So that's a lot of the work as well.
Yeah, that translation to me is so important, and one of the reasons why I've enjoyed working with you and getting to know you and doing some of the things that I do now. So one of the questions that I know I've been asked as, you know, as a scientist, well, you're a scientist, why are you making your science political? When I mention that I'm talking to legislators or other sorts of decision makers, how might you respond to somebody who says, oh, I don't want to make my science political, or scientists shouldn't be involved in politics?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so interesting is politics exists only by people talking to politicians. You know, there are facts in the world, but there are so many different things that can be taken on. Politicians are responsive to things that their constituents or, you know, the country, you know, depends on their interests, need or think are important. And when scientists or science are not in the room, what it means is everybody else gets priority, gets importance. And the things that scientists study that are so fundamental to, I mean, everything in the world, but really truly our well-being, you know, our ability to prosper, then get left out.
Yeah.
So if scientists really, I mean, there's this expression that if you're not at the table, you're what's for dinner. And, you know, if scientists aren't actually communicating, then somebody else is going to be doing it for them, and we are going to lose out. And when I say we, I don't just mean scientists, I mean really all of us.
That to me, I think, is such an important point that I think has been lost, that you're not necessarily being political in how people think of that term. You're not taking a side. You're advocating for science and scientists and for facts. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is a really important thing. And I think some scientists forget that we need to talk about it to not just other scientists.
You know, if I could build on that a little bit, you know, we are at a moment where there's increasing mistrust of science from a variety of sectors on a variety of issues. And one of the things that I've really been reflecting on is the fact that we've gotten somewhat, I don't know, complacent maybe within the scientific community with this idea that everyone will just understand what science is about, why it's important, you know, that scientists come at things because of curiosity and a desire to understand things better. But if no one is actually, you know, part of the world or part of the broader community, then how are people supposed to know that? And I think it is really imperative in this moment that we in the science community, and many people do this already. I don't want to paint a total brush, but that bigger numbers of the scientific community step out and actually talk about what science is and what it's not and what it means and why it's already part of the community. So if anything, like I don't see this as politics. I think it as being part of the world. And science has always been part of the world. It's just that for a while, there's been this sense that we don't necessarily have to be.
What a wonderful way to make that point. And I think that's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you. It's like, what if you're giving any advice to somebody who is younger or exploring their options in the world? What would your advice be based
Yeah.
on everything that we've talked about today?
I mean, there's so much that goes into it. I would say if you have a spark, if you have an interest, explore it, read, talk to people, talk to teachers, go online, although check where you're going online, making sure it's not fake, but you know, don't let anyone discourage you from that spark and that interest and just explore and don't worry about, failing or doing badly or just if you have an interest in it, just work through it. Whatever, not everything is going to go perfectly. I think too many young people don't hear that, you know, but if you have that interest, that's really gold. It's valuable, keep going. And if you're exploring and you don't know what that is, then I would say stay open, talk to people, listen to people, see, if there's something new out in the world. I think we don't necessarily know as young people all the possible opportunities that are out there. I mean, you talked about how you wouldn't have known that science policy was a thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know? I didn't necessarily know science policy was a thing either. I just knew that I wanted science to make a difference. And so, how does that happen? And I found my way into it. But if you're like me and you're an introvert, or you're like, it is way too scary to talk to some adult or professional or older person or scientist or whatever, don't worry. Please don't worry. Just set it up. Ask, an adult to go on LinkedIn, go find someone and send them an email or a social media direct message and just ask, hey, what you do seems cool. Can I talk to you about it? I'm trying to figure out if I might be interested in it. And, most of the time you will get a delighted yes. And even if you get a no, like, big deal. Just, you're likely to get a yes the next time. So those are the things that I think are so important.
I think that is such a great thing to be thinking about is, you know, just because you don't get a yes right now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get a yes to the next thing. So to be open to the possibility of someone saying no, but also being optimistic that they're going to say yes.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people talking about how terrified they are of making a mistake, and I always say, like, strive for excellence, but don't be afraid of failure.
Well, I I have two comments on that. Is one, I always learn more from my mistakes than I do from my successes.
Yeah.
I also learn so much when other people share their missteps,
Mm.
um, because I one of the things I like to say is like I don't want to make the same mistakes somebody else did. I want to make new and exciting mistakes, because I think we can all learn from each other, and if we get a little bit less afraid of failure or less afraid of not being perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about learning from mistakes. It's like, look, let's just say for a moment that you took some job that you don't like. Well, that's awesome. Congratulations. You've discovered one thing that is not for you. I mean,
Exactly.
you have to narrow things down somehow.
Yes. Well, and sometimes you'll think that, no, this is exactly what I want to be doing. I mean, I had that experience in graduate school. I started out in on one pathway in graduate school, and I was like, no, this is not really where I want to go. And so being open to the possibilities. And Lexi, it's like, I think you are very good at helping people be open to those possibilities through the work you do and through the advocacy you do, not just to decision makers, but advocacy to scientists to help them be their full self. Did you have any closing words for us today?
No, I am inspired every day by the students and the earlier career folks that I meet and how amazing and open they are, how committed they are. And if I can help people actually move past any fears, this is why I talk about, building not just skills, but confidence. That's one of the biggest joys in my life. And I wish that for everyone. I want them to be able to feel their own confidence.
Yeah, Lexi, and I think you do an amazing job with that. And I'm so glad that you were able to join us today to talk a little bit about your pathway and some of your insights on a career in science and science policy.
This has been so great. Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lexi. This has been the STEAM of Consciousness podcast from the ARI Podcasting Network. Thank you for joining us. And this podcast is produced by Ryan Kessler. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to listen to new episodes of STEAM of Consciousness, available on your preferred podcast listening station.